Good morning and welcome to our Reducing VOC Emissions webinar from Swagelok, Ontario, Atlantic Canada. We're going to get started in a few minutes. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A chat, which you see on your screen. As I said, we'll get started in a few minutes, but we'll monitor any questions that you post in the Q&A. Good morning. Welcome to Swagelok, Ontario, Atlantic Canada's webinar on reducing volatile organic compound emissions. We're looking forward to sharing some valuable content with you on the new regulations from the government. And we want to thank you for taking the time out to be with us today. I know we're all busy these days, so thanks for attending today. And we have some really great content that we'll be sharing with you today. But before we get started, I just want to give you a few housekeeping items here. Please use the live event Q&A feature for all questions. You'll see that at the top of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the session. If you have any further questions, please contact our subject matter experts, whose emails you see on the screen. We have Max Jantz and Fesi Kaja. So please reach out to them after if you have any questions. Now I'd like to pass it over to our regional field engineer, Max Jantz, to get started with the Reducing VOC Emissions webinar. Max, take it away.
Thank you, Tim. Back into the presentation slide deck here. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Max Jantz. As Tim mentioned, I am a regional field engineer with Swagelok, Ontario, Atlantic Canada. I've been with the organization a little over 3.5 years. My day-to-day is made up of looking after our oil and gas and chem refining initiatives, and I also lead our strategic involvement within those industries. A little about myself, I really enjoy experiencing that on-site problem solving that is part of my job, and it happens at our customer facilities. I really like that each visit is different, and that building relationships with our customers who use our product every day, I find is very beneficial and crucial, to both mine and our team's ability to serve our customers, but also improve our product line. Our factory does a great job of using feedback from out in the field and taking those points into consideration when working on both new products and services. I'm very fortunate to be that on-site reference for our factory, and I always look forward to getting out in the field. But today, I'm here with all of you, working from my home office in Southwestern Ontario. And for the beginning of our time together, we'll be focusing on the regulation that you can see here on the screen. So the reason why we're all here is the reduction in the release of volatile organic compounds, specifically in the petroleum sector. We've compiled some great information to provide to you all today. So let's get started. So just a little bit about our company. You'll see here highlighted in blue the region that our Sales and Service Center, or SSCs, covers, scattered across 4 physical locations, 3 in Ontario, being Sarnia, where I'm based out of, Mississauga, as well as Ottawa are our Ontario offices. We also have an out east office in New Brunswick, specifically the city of St. John, and we also utilize an agent based out of Newfoundland who handles a lot of our involvement out there in the petroleum industry. And providing our customers with the right resource at the right time is something that we aim for when creating solutions to our customers' fluid system problems. And really, fluid systems are the focus of this regulation and why we're providing this webinar to you today. A little bit more background as to what makes up those physical locations, as they're not just buildings, there's people that are associated with them as well. We're a growing team of 60 associates through those 4 SSCs, or Sales and Service Centers. And within those 60 associates, we actually have 9 engineers on staff. From 3 facilities in our Ontario locations, we're able to fabricate custom solutions, which I'll touch on towards the end of this presentation. And on top of that local presence that I just explained, Swagelok is also a corporate entity located in Solon, Ohio. Globally, there are 225 sales and service locations and over 3,000 associates. And based in Ohio, that's where we manufacture our product. And then that corporate factory entity also provides additional support on top of what is already offered through our local SSCs whenever it's necessary. So getting into the agenda of the presentation today, stepping away from who we are as a business and getting into the content, I'll review the why and the who behind the creation of the regulation, where you can find it for yourself, and then break down its structure. From there, I'll explain what sections of this regulation are already in enforcement and how facilities are currently handling their new responsibilities. Moving on from what is already in effect, I'll break down the upcoming sections, which will be coming into force January 1st of 2023. So only a short time away. And then to wrap up, I'll break down how Swagelok can provide support via our engineering, fabrication, training, and pre-engineered services that are related to the regulation sections we'll be exploring today. So going into a regulation overview, the reduction in the release of VOC regulation was created under the Canadian Environmental Act, which, for those of you who don't know, is an act respecting pollution prevention and the protection of the environment and human health in order to contribute to sustainable development. Basically, the Act provides the legislative basis for a range of federal environmental and health protection programs, acting as an umbrella under which the regulation and many others are created. The regulation itself was developed because the federal government wanted to develop a comprehensive risk management strategy for those volatile organic compounds. They knew facilities out in the sector were already utilizing best practices, but that some were, possibly doing more than others when it came to reducing the emissions. So they wanted to create some consistency. This is of importance because the emission of VOCs not only possesses environmental and health risks to Canadians, but also causes financial losses for those facilities. The regulation was created via collaboration from both the Government of Canada as well as provincial and territorial governments. And then also they took input from industry and other stakeholders to ensure that they had a well-rounded regulation. Other stakeholders could be communities around those industries. It could be different companies within that sector, contractors, anything that's kind of parallel to the petroleum industry was also brought into the conversation when developing the regulation. And ultimately, the objective for all those involved was to decrease VOC releases, decrease exposure to cancer-causing substances, improve health, create consistent VOC risk management measures for all facilities, and also complement existing measures in other jurisdictions. So I think a key point here is that the regulation doesn't just focus on the negatives that these facilities have, but also some of the positives that those good actors were doing long before the regulation came into enforcement. Continuing on with the regulation overview, it covers a large amount of responsibilities that these facilities are expected to abide by, but it's broken up into sections. These sections detail either responsibilities that the facilities affected are expected to take on, or it provides supporting information that is necessary to carry out responsibilities in the future. So essentially, it explicitly states what you need to do, or it explicitly states a plan that you need to develop in order to do a future responsibility that could be coming in later sections. If you're curious or want to read the regulation for yourself, the link on the screen will bring you to the government webpage where the regulation can be reviewed in its entirety. So prior to outlining those in-force sections, we've covered the regulation's creation and its purpose, but it's important for you all to know which facilities from that sector are expected to abide by the regulation's enforced sections. The verbiage from the regulation states, a facility that produces liquid petroleum products and or produces petrochemical products and is operated in an integrated way to those production processes are expected to abide by the enforcement of the regulations. This can include refineries, upgraders, and other petrochemical facilities outlined in the regulation. And being that this is a federal regulation, this applies to those aforementioned type of facilities across the country. So now I'm going to touch on the sections that are already enforced and then are coming into enforce soon. Section 1, subject to subsections 2 and 3, came into effect on December 1st, 2020. This section included the interpretation of the regulation, which basically broke down a lot of the definitions and words that would be coming up frequently throughout the upcoming sections. It was essentially the groundwork for what was to come. Also included was its application, which focused on the types of facilities that were going to be subject to these regulations, that section that I just finished reading on the slide prior. And the reason behind this was because there was a lot of ambiguity in the first initial conversations regarding the regulation as to who this may involve. The petroleum sector is not just refineries. There's a lot of different companies and facilities included in it, so they needed to be specific. And then on top of that, preliminary LDAR, or leak detection and repair requirements, were also included. It basically stated an operator at these facilities must establish and maintain an LDAR program to control VOC emissions on site. The remainder of Section 3 and then Sections 4 through 10 came into force later in January 1st, 2022. These furthered the efforts of those LDAR programs and included additional responsibilities related to asset or equipment management. Additional monitoring equipment was also requested and required rather, subject to a set list of additional requirements. So the monitoring equipment was specified within the regulations section, and then it also outlined that anybody using said monitoring equipment must be trained, and as well, record keeping related to valves in which 3 significant leaks had been recorded also were subject to record keeping responsibilities in an effort to remove and replace valves that were consistently leaking and instead install a low emissions valve instead of something that's causing a problem on site. One comment I want to make revolving around the enforced section is that we've personally had the opportunity to be out in the field and witness these LDAR programs or leak detection and repair programs, as well as asset management plans already working and doing what the regulation intended them to do, which I think says a lot about the engagement and the willingness to adhere to the regulation from all these facilities involved. These regulations are very important when it comes to the safe and efficient operation of the petroleum sector, both now and in the future. Moving on, I'll go through the upcoming sections in a little bit more detail over the next few slides, and hopefully these upcoming sections will generate questions that can then create some dialogue amongst our participants in the Q&A feature. So coming into enforce this new year, January 1st, 2023, sections 11 through 16. Section 11 is essentially another kind of kickoff section, and it states that additional responsibilities operators will now also have to ensure equipment components at their facility meet the requirements set out in subsequent sections 12 through 15. Section 12 then goes on to discuss pipes. Section 13 discusses sampling systems. Section 14 provides design recommendations and information related to pressure relief devices. Section 15 outlines requirements for centrifugal compressors and their seal systems. And then finally, Section 16 provides requirements based on record keeping, which are related to the previously mentioned sections. So sections 12 through 15 also have an additional record keeping component that is expected to them on top of design consideration and best practice integration. So moving into those sections that are coming into enforce January 1st of 2023, we have section 12, which is related to pipes. From the regulation, it states that the responsibility of an operator at a facility is to ensure that the end of a pipe is plugged using a method to the extent possible in which VOC emissions are reduced. This may include the use of a cap, blind flange, plug, or block and bleed valve setup in which a process end is closed prior to a bleed valve being opened. This block and bleed method is extremely common in the petroleum industry and is considered a best practice, honestly, when dealing with a variety of fluid systems. We use block and bleed setups in the nuclear industry as well as power generation, to name a few. This section does not apply to any piping systems that are in contact with a process media that could polymerize. So that feedback coming from industry partners really applies to all the exceptions that are outlined. There's really specific information that detail that someone that knew what they were talking about when it came to specific process media raised their hand and actually said, you know, it would actually be unsafe for us to treat this system in this way. How can we come up with an exception to ensure that we're not, hindering processes that need to have certain applications set up the way that they are? It is also not applicable to an operation in which a pipe is required to be open. Think of an emergency evacuation system or wastewater runoff where the media is being collected into an open tank. You know, these just don't require the need to be capped. So to review, for Section 12, the responsibility of the facility is to ensure certain piping systems that are open are plugged to minimize VOC emissions. Section 13 goes to outline criteria that have to be met with regard to on-site sampling system design. Sampling system in the petroleum sector have come a long way from the once common spigot and pail method. These archaic methods of sampling lead to a whole host of problems and are not acceptable practices in industry anymore. And ultimately, the challenges associated with those systems are one of the main reasons why this regulation was created. First and foremost, an operator pulling a sample using that spigot and pail method is exposed to whatever process media they're sampling. Spills and vapor releases are also very common when your sample bomb is exposed to atmosphere from its container. On top of the health challenges those sample methods brought along, quality concerns were also an issue. Representative samples not only are easier for lab technicians to make their analysis on, but also allow for more accurate process changes to be conducted if a facility feels that they're creating off-spec product. Representative samples were tough to get with that old school method. These changes outlined in the regulations state the design of on-site sampling must include closed purge, closed loop, and closed vent systems. This means that a sample is contained in a closed container, and any process media not contained in the volume of that sample is either returned to the process, disposed, reused, or treated and reintegrated into the process downstream. This design practice mitigates both the health concerns and quality issues facilities are plagued with when still using those out-of-date methods. Special note as well, operator enjoyment and usability of the systems is also something to take in consideration. Operators that are conducting sampling work with those out-of-date methods have seen huge improvements switching to those closed containers because they're not actually being exposed to the process media they're sampling. I don't know how many times we've been out at a customer site, taking a walk down their sample stations, and we kind of glance by a sample system that looks like it hasn't been used in a couple of years. And a common question is, hey, should we go take a look at that one? And usually it's, oh, don't worry about that one. We don't really use it anymore. It either stinks up our coveralls and we don't like smelling like that all day. It trips gas monitors too frequently, or it just isn't intuitive to use. Those reply backs are common. And that was kind of driving the regulation to come up with some sections that not only provided best practices for design, but also operating procedures as well. You want to try and keep your operations team safe and happy so that they can go out and conduct their samples while also providing good information to the lab so that they can then carry out their work as well. So to review for Section 13, the responsibility of the facility is to ensure sampling systems are compliant to design criteria and minimize VOC releases. Section 14 moves us into pressure relief devices, or PRDs. It states every PRD must be designed in a manner that minimizes the release of VOCs. Now, obviously, I think we can start to see a pattern develop here. It calls out release of VOCs emissions in the title of the regulation, and that's a main focus. It further states two options as potential design solutions, including of installing a rupture disc upstream of the PRD or utilizing a closed vent connection between the PRD and the process. On top of minimizing VOCs, implementing best practices is also a common theme. This section is no different. However, given these devices do relieve pressure, this section does go a step further and provides maintenance responsibilities that the operator at the facility must abide by following a release. It states, following a pressure release, the PRD must, not more than 5 days after the day on which the release ends, be returned to a condition in which VOC releases are minimized. Ensuring proper components and procedures are in place to conduct this work efficiently, and a chance that a release does occur will be the responsibility of the operator. So in summary, that responsibility of the facility is to ensure PRDs are designed in a way that VOC emissions are minimized, and the record-keeping aspect of capturing those releases in some sort of report are also kept up to date. Moving into section 15, which focuses on centrifugal compressors. The regulation states every centrifugal compressor must be equipped with a mechanical seal that has a barrier fluid system. This seal system must be operated with a fluid that is at all times higher pressure than the stuffing box pressure. It must also have a degassing reservoir that is connected by a closed vent system to the process, and finally must be equipped with a purge system that purges barrier fluid into the process and prevents releases of VOCs. This can cause existing systems on site to either be refurbished or possibly even replaced, depending on how they're currently laid out. The good thing is typically these systems are already included in asset management programs that are being followed on site. It would be very straightforward for the operator in the facility to evaluate and audit these systems to determine their compliance. And then the facility can then develop plans to either bring their seals up to spec as per the requirements of the regulations or monitor their compliance as the regulation continues to become in effect. One thing to keep in mind that there is an exception in this section. The requirements do not apply to a centrifugal compressor that is equipped with a closed vent style system designed to capture any leakage from the drive shaft and transport it to process. These types of assets are considered to be in compliance and would not require an evaluation. Again, likely another note from an industry stakeholder that said, hold on, we're already doing something that is in compliance with this regulation. Let's be very specific with the bad actor assets that we're trying to rein in emissions on and call those out, but leave the other ones that are operating just fine as they are. So in summary, compressors, centrifugal compressors to be specific, must have a seal with a barrier fluid system. The final section coming into enforcement January 1st of this upcoming year is record keeping. It states the operator must, for each calendar year, keep a record of the following information. And then it goes down to kind of break down sections 12 through 15 and what record keeping responsibilities go alongside with the information we previously covered. There's a lot to digest here, and given these responsibilities fall on the operators at your facility, we highly recommend reviewing this section in detail on your own. Again, we've included the link on screen to send you to the regulation where you can review it. I'll touch on them briefly. So for pipes, sampling systems, and PRDs or pressure relief devices, the record-keeping minimum requirements state the ID number of the system and a description of the design considerations taken into account along with operating practices is required. On top of that, comments must be made to ensure that the system is indeed designed in accordance with that section number that the system falls under. A large portion of these requirements is likely already included in asset management plans, but for pipes, a system that may have never required such a focus, this could be another task added onto those already extensive and complicated programs. The PRD release that is referenced in section 14 also includes its own set of record-keeping attributes. If the PRD did not minimize VOC release during a period of more than 1 hour, a record of when the release occurred and when it was returned to a compliant state will need to be kept. Again, along with the ID number of that PRD, which is likely for addressing problem components that are maybe result in more releases than others. Compressors record-keeping content again requires at a minimum the ID number, a compliancy status, an indication that the barrier fluid contains less than 10% VOCs, and an indication that an audible failure alarm and failure sensors are on the asset as well. So essentially, they want to make sure that these centrifugal compressors cannot just fail in silence. Very typical to a pump or compressor. If they go down, it causes a whole host of issues on site. So typically these already have these, but it's a good gut check to double check and make sure that these alarms and sensors are installed on the asset seal support to ensure that that asset or unit doesn't go down. Special note, these records do have a retention period of at least 5 years, as per the section requirements in subsection 2. So we've worked through the regulation now in detail, outlining the responsibilities and expectations related to design considerations. And I'd assume some of you probably have identified some challenges that your facility now may be exposed to given these new responsibilities. So I'm going to take the remaining time we have together to go and show you how Swagelok can assist in remedying those responsibility growing pains. First, I want to introduce our engineering team. These individuals that you see on screen are peppered across our region and are ready to assist you with all your fluid system needs. We've got some great experience on both our inside and outside team members whose day-to-day focus is truly partnering with our customers and creating tailored solutions to their problems. So to begin on our services side of thing, our evaluation and advisory services allow our team to perform specific assessments on system we are subject matter experts on. Now, we're not just looking to replace your existing systems, but rather we're exploring ways to improve your sampling performance. Some key things that we keep in mind while on site and evaluating your system are reducing time delays, so ensuring that that sample coming out of that process pipe ends up at your sample station in a timely manner, resulting in representative samples, which is another thing that we like to keep in mind. You wouldn't want a sample leading to incorrect data that could possibly lead to process changes that lead to you creating off-spec product. So ensuring whatever sample is occurring in your sample bomb, sample bottle is representative of what actually is occurring in your process is very, very important. Other things that are just good engineering practices are material capability and compatibility rather. So ensuring if a system is exposed to H2S, ensuring properly coated components because it's a very sticky molecule is something that we take into consideration as well. And just ensuring that valves have proper elastomers selected to ensure that leaks don't happen down the road are also other considerations that we take and those things that we keep in mind. We're also looking at how to reduce maintenance and downtime as we're walking through those systems. And then overall best practice integration is something that we also always keep in the back of our minds while we're evaluating these on-site systems. And these best practices either come from our internal knowledge, customer feedback that we get, or global support that I'll touch on later in this presentation. These considerations are constantly in our minds as we evaluate your on-site systems. And then from those on-site interactions, we then produce a report that captures all of our observations, our evaluations, and then also our recommendations. And this information is then provided to the customer, and these types of services can run parallel to record keeping and reporting requirements that are expected to be provided annually at these facilities subject to compliance under the regulations that we touched on today. Now, although it does come from a Swagelok Sales and Service Center, it's not simply a sales document. It's a detailed look into the current state of your on-site sampling system performance and recommendations on how to improve the systems based on feedback from a subject matter expert. This type of service, I should also mention, is available for seal support as well as gas distribution, which fall under our pre-engineered solutions, and it can be leveraged to supplement additional record-keeping responsibility associated with those sections, specifically seal support. So I'll go over now what are our pre-engineered solutions that essentially are stemming from those on-site interactions. And specifically, this is related to sampling and compressors. So we offer 2 pre-engineered solution programs that relate very well to this regulation, those being mechanical seal support and grab sampling systems. These programs take into consideration best practices outlined in each respective section of these upcoming regulations that we reviewed today. For grab sampling, we offer 2 versions of systems, a liquid and a gas model, which have options worked into their part numbering structures. And these options can then be selected either simply by reviewing our catalogs or working through the selection processes with one of our sampling subject matter experts. And the same goes for seal support systems. The application solutions were developed with best practices in mind and guided by API 682. Swagelok seal support systems go further and try to avoid pipe threads and minimize the number of connections where possible. Obviously, fewer connection points means fewer leaks. Pipe threads compared to tubes, there's a whole conversation that can be had there. So we try to minimize the use of piping connections and utilize tubing connections instead. And I want to touch on usability here for a second as well. We want to ensure that the user experience is as good as the quality of the materials that we use. You could engineer a perfect system and then it would be, not as intuitive or not as easy to use on site. And that's where getting on site and speaking with our operators, with the technicians, with the contractors that both install and use these systems, and not only our systems, but also our products on a day-to-day, really helps us generate the next latest and greatest version of these pre-engineered solutions and really ensure that the user experience is as good as the quality of the materials. So both these solutions are usually the result of our advisory services, and honestly, they result in just proper system implementation. So although yes, you can go to the catalog and spec one of these out yourselves, it's best to get that discussion going early. We can identify your problems and really the goal of what your sampling system is meant to achieve, and then we can either go with one of our pre-engineered solutions, kind of straight off the rack, if you will, or we can look at customizing it via our custom solutions department, which is actually the next slide in our presentation here. So our inside engineering team works alongside our fabrication capabilities via our custom solutions department. This department is capable of taking your idea and turning it into a physical, turnkey, ready-to-use solution that is built with the same quality that comes from our fittings. Each CES project is managed from conception to delivery, along with everything in between. So that covers drawing revisions, procurement of components, both Swagelok and third party, and then any sort of, additional hold points or inspection test plans that have to be integrated in a project as well. We all, communicate that with our customer that we can handle those responsibilities for the lifetime of that project. So this department focuses on a few things specifically to be configurable, because let's be honest, not all facilities are the same. Certain ones have their different quirks and features that they enjoy installing on their systems, and we're not at the liberty to tell them that they don't, they can't have those. So we implement them into the systems and then are able to make sure that the operators, again, and the people using our stuff are happy to use it because it has their own, flavor installed on it. We also want to be local because sometimes communication breaks down when dealing with out-of-town vendors. And also, how nice is it to just go see your physical system being fabricated? We have that capability at our 3 locations based here in Ontario, where you can come to our shop, get your hands on the equipment and hands on the system, witness the testing that's going down, and ensuring that once your system leaves our shop, it's ready to be put into your process and used kind of immediately. And we strive to ensure that our customers are also confident in not only our systems, and not only our fittings rather, but also in our systems. So we want to mimic the same quality that they have in their minds as one of our, simple tube fitting tees, as well as our fully configured system. So that reliability is also a key attribute that we strive to keep. So these systems are built by our trained and competent fabrication technicians that are governed by an internal quality system. And again, this ensures that our systems are ready to head into commissioning once they leave our shops. Moving into our training services, our in-person hands-on training allow our trainers to provide their knowledge to the next group of fluid system operators. This includes a whole suite of offerings that you can see now on your screens. And when we're evaluating on-site systems, we run into situations where the facility has done all the right things. The proper component was selected, nothing was spec'd that potentially had limits below operating or design conditions, best practices were followed in the system design, yet the system's still underperforming and we can't figure out why. And more times than not, it's likely due to a simple leak occurring somewhere either upstream or downstream of those systems, or it could be improper installation practices. These leaks, whether they're sending VOCs into the environment, or maybe even something as simple as a steam or compressed air leak, cost the facility money. And training is a key point to address those issues. If all the other boxes are checked, where else do you go? You look at the training of the people that are installing and using these systems and see if you can change that attribute. So ensuring that your facilities have proper training to both use and maintain even the simplest of our tube fittings can lead to huge returns in both losses and downtime. So on screen, we brainstormed some challenges that you may already be experiencing or are going to experience with the increase in responsibility based off disease regulations, those being record keeping, resource constraints, and lack of subject matter experts. And please keep in mind that we're here to assist with those challenges. You know, record keeping can be supplemented by us handling some of the evaluation and advisory responsibilities that the sections on seal support and grab sampling are asking of your facility. And now with the lack of SME comment, we're not here to, cast judgment on the people at these facilities, might not know what they're dealing with, but let's be honest, everyone is stretched thin at this moment. And you might not have the time to become a subject matter expert on a very specific portion of your job because you're just trying to keep the plant operating. And that's where we come in. We pick up the slack from an engineering perspective, and then we can also be leveraged to, when time allows it, come into your facility and provide that subject matter expert training to create now an on-site reference for, sampling systems or seal support systems or any one of our applied training courses. Resource constraints are another one, slowing down everybody's workflow recently. But again, our field engineers and our CS department, along with our pre-engineered solutions, allow us to be very well positioned to address customer requests when maybe the bandwidth isn't there on site. On top of that readiness to serve, we're backed by our quality components, programs, and training to assure, again, you get the same quality from our components as well as in other aspects of our business. So we challenge you to reach out and ask us those questions, bring us your challenges. We want to hear them. If they're related to fluid systems, there's a very good chance that we have some sort of solution internally that can at least help with a few of the responsibilities that you'll be undertaking. And now to wrap things up, the sections within this regulation, again, all have some sort of fluid system component associated with them. And we are your local fluid system experts. We can not only improve reliability, performance, and usability of these systems that we touched on today, but we can also reduce operating costs and boost productivity as well. We're interested in not only being a parts provider, but also creating partnerships with our customers as well. And utilizing and exposing our inside and outside engineering support is a key path forward for that. Our local teams want to integrate so that your goals and challenges also become ours. Circling back to that brief global note that I made at the beginning of this presentation, on top of our established local team of engineers and associates, we also have access to over 100 field engineers spread out across the North American continent, as well as even more globally, who we regularly consult with. There could be an issue that a facility in Ontario is experiencing that's already been solved by a facility down in Texas, or maybe even as far away as overseas in Spain. And the fact that we're internally collaborating with our global teams on a very, very regular basis, those solutions are more readily available than ever before. And internal collaboration globally is a very key attribute for our business, both now and moving forward. So I appreciate you listening to our content today. We're going to wrap up the presentation here and jump into the Q&A portion and see if there's any questions left hanging out that we can address via the team here.
Awesome. Thanks, Max, for the presentation. We did have a few questions come in through the Q&A chat, and Fessie's been responding to them, typing in responses. I'll run through a few of them that he's responded to and a few that are still open. One question was, Section 15 is also January 2023? And Fessie responded, yes, Section 11 through 16 are coming into effect on January 2023. So we had that question. Another question was, do Swagelok engineers go to remote locations to do these services, or just in the regions near the Swagelok offices? And as Fessie pointed out, Swagelok engineers are spread out through the entirety of Ontario and Atlantic Canada, and they travel to remote locations if needed. So we have your support wherever you may be in Ontario or Atlantic Canada, and also that global support that Max mentioned earlier. And then there's one that's open here, Max. It's from Afshin. Have these regulations been adopted by a provincial regulatory, or is it a mandate and should it be followed?
Yeah, great question. Since this is a federal regulation, obviously each provincial regulatory may have additional VOC regulations that they employ at a provincial level. But since this being a federal release, all provinces and territories are expected to abide by these regulations. So I hope that answers your question, Aston. Very good question. And if you have any additional questions, or maybe our answer didn't necessarily give you the content that you require, by all means, reach out. We've been fully immersed in this regulation as of recently, and as well, review it at your own time, because there's a lot of information to unpack there, but it's really good content, and it's written in a way that's pretty easily understood. So thank you, great question.
It's awesome, thanks Max. And we had another question come in. It is, when is the deadline to be in compliance with this legislation?
Yeah, great question. So explicitly mentioned in the regulation, there are no deadlines. However, there is enforcement times. So if the enforcement sections, the ones that we spoke about today, coming into effect January 1st, 2023, there is annual reports to be generated based on those sections. So you have to be compliant in releasing those reports before the next calendar year. Now, in regards to what the government is going to determine when it comes to compliance and all that stuff, that's still to be considered. But those annual reports are to be generated, and plans must be in place to ensure that the facility is trying to become in compliance if a host of their assets or equipment related to the sections that we spoke on today are not up to compliant. Yes, plans have to be in place within that next calendar year.
Awesome, thanks Max. Don't see any other questions, but we'll keep it open for a couple of minutes afterwards. If anybody has any questions, you'll be able to put it in the live event Q&A. But as Max mentioned, and as you can see on your screen, Max and Fessy are subject matter experts when it comes to the regulation, so please reach out to them at the emails you see on the screen. And want to give a big thank you to Max today for running through this with everyone. Great job yet again, and it is a condensed presentation, so if you have more detailed questions, it's best to reach out to our team of field engineers and our engineering services team for their input. And Fessy put a more detailed explanation in here as well for the deadlines. So please take a look at the Q&A chat, because there's some good details in there as well. I wanted to thank Max for the presentation today, and the whole team who supported him. And thanks again for the attendees for coming out for this webinar. We are looking forward to continuing the conversation with you. This is just the start. Like I said, it's an overview presentation, but we're here to support you and help you with your applications and with your needs when it comes to regulations and anything else you need at your site. So with that, we will wrap up the live event. Thanks again, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.